My friends, Chag Sameach. On Simchat Torah, we celebrate the tradition of our Torah and all of its teachings. Usually we would be all together dancing with the Torahs and unrolling the Torah all around the congregation, something they taught me not to do in rabbinical school, but I'm not much of a rule follower, as my family would tell you. So we always like to unroll the Torah and see it, and we want to show it to you today. We've unrolled the Torah all the way down the social hall, and we want to give you a tour, a quick tour, all the way back through our tradition from the end of Deuteronomy all the way back to the beginning of Genesis. So let's see what we can find when we take a look at the Torah. We're all the way here at the end of Deuteronomy, and we see the end of the story where we hear that Moses has come to the end of his life, and he comes to the end of his life, and he dies, and the Israelites are ready to enter the promised land. And actually the last word of the Torah is Yisrael, because the Israelites are ready to go into the promised land. But it's sort of like the ultimate cliffhanger, because this is the end of the Torah. We haven't gone into the promised land. The story continues in that direction with all of you and all of me. We are still writing the story. So even though the scroll has come to an end, the story hasn't come to an end. So let's make our way back through the Torah and see what we can find. Oh my goodness, it is Parshat Ha'azinu, where Moses is singing his last poetry, his last song of praise and reminder and admonition to the Israelites to make sure that they follow God's law and remember their history, just as we do on Simchat Torah. We're making our way backwards all the way through the book of Deuteronomy. I don't want to make you too dizzy, but it's so important that we see the words of Torah and we feel the words of Torah and we celebrate words of Torah. So now we're back in the 6th chapter of Deuteronomy, and here's some words you might know. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha B'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha. Just as our B'nai Mitzvah chanted this evening, we're called to love God with all of our hearts and all of our souls and everything that we have. And that comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6. And just before that, in the next paragraph before, we have the beginnings of the 10 Commandments. Anochi Adonai Elohecha, asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim. This is the second time in the Torah we see the 10 Commandments. And here we have the most important one, of course, kabet et avicha ve'et imecha, honor your parents. So all of us need to honor our parents. And so important was that law and all the other big 10 Commandments, and we're not talking about Wisconsin, that the 10 Commandments are repeated here in Deuteronomy, and we're going to see them again in Exodus. And we make our way through Deuteronomy, and we have these 4 lines of open space. That's our indication that we're going from one book to another. In that direction is Numbers, and in that direction is Deuteronomy. And we have a break as we go from one book to the next, as we make our way backwards through the story here in Numbers. And then we get to one of my most favorite stories, the story of the daughters of Tzalafchad, who teach us about equality and the importance of women and all people having equal rights, in this case, the right to inheritance. So crazy was their idea that they should be able to inherit the property of their father who had died, that Moses didn't know what to do, and he had to go ask God what to do about their plea. And ultimately, God says women need to have equal rights, and we're still working to make that true in our lives today. So we keep making our way back through the book of Numbers, and we make our way here, and we get to the paradigm of prayer. Here in chapter 12 of the book of Numbers, we see Moses' sister become ill, and we have these famous words from Moses, who prays for his sister. El na rafa na la. Moses cried, please heal her. So in this moment, as we're reading back through the story, if you're thinking of someone that you are praying for healing of body or healing of spirit, I'd like to invite you to say their names out loud wherever you are, and you can join me also in song as we hear these words from Moses coming down to us. El na rifana la, el na rifana la. And Moses cried, please heal her, heal Miriam, this I pray. And Moses cried, heal Miriam, this I pray. We pray for healing for all of our loved ones. We continue backwards in our story. We come all the way back to Numbers chapter 6, and we get to the priestly blessing that we offer on moments of joy and celebration. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, v'yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God bless us all with wholeness and with peace, and may God lift God's face to us in protection always. So we make our way backwards. We're going backwards, and here we have the break between Leviticus in this direction and Numbers in that direction, and we go back and back and back. We're almost halfway through the Torah, and we come to Parashat Tazria Metzora, which is the bane of B'nai Mitzvah, because it talks about things like what happens when people get sick, when people have viruses and diseases that we don't understand, and how are we meant to treat them. And even though the Torah is an ancient document, it teaches us that we have to take care of one another. And in this time of COVID, we hear that message now more than ever. Continue to make our way through the book of Leviticus that tells us and teaches us how to be holy and live a holy path. And then we get to the break between Leviticus in that direction and Exodus in that direction. We make our way back through this long story of the journey of building the tabernacle, the Mishkan. What does it mean to build a holy place? Whether that holy place is a fixed place at the corner of 79th and 2nd, or whether that holy place is on Zoom. God says you can build a holy place wherever you are. And then we make our way back through Exodus, and we get to the 10 Commandments. This is actually take one, where we get the instructions from God at Mount Sinai, and we learn and become covenanted with God as a people. Everything before is covenanted between God and individual Israelites and Hebrews. Now we become a covenanted people in truth. And as we continue our way back through the journey, we get to the Song of the Sea that Cantor sings so beautifully every year when we crossed the Reed Sea and we knew that we were free, finally, from Egyptian bondage. We're rolling our story back quickly, and we get to the stories of the plagues and Moses and God working together that free the Israelites and say to Pharaoh, let my people go. And then we get back to the beginning of the story of Exodus, where a new Pharaoh arose who didn't know Joseph and imposed hard labor on the Israelites. And we see at the end of the book, so this is Exodus in this direction, this is Genesis in this direction. We have this break here, and this is a massive break because at the end of the book of Genesis, things are good for the Israelites in Egypt. We have prime real estate on the Upper East Side of Pithom and Ramses, and we are doing well, and everything is going well. But then things turn between here and here in these 4 lines. And now we're in Genesis, where we hear the stories of covenant and dreams and sibling rivalry and going down to Egypt eventually, and Jacob's 12 sons, and the story of Jacob becoming Israel. And oh my gosh, there's more that I can tell than I have time for, but you have to keep studying Torah along with us as we make our way through this journey. We see the stories of Rachel and Leah and Jacob and Rebekah and Isaac and Sarah and Abraham. And we come back here in the book of Genesis to this famous story, the binding of Isaac, that we spoke about on Rosh Hashanah. And we continue to make our way through the book of Genesis, almost all the way to the back. And we're almost there, and we make our way back through the story of the primal history of Noah and the flood and all of these stories that we so cherish and so study every single year. And finally, we make our way back to the creation story, Breshit bara Elohim, and the story starts over once again. We need to continue to learn the story. The story continues perhaps even before this, but definitely in this direction, and we hope that you'll continue to learn and study with your sacred congregation.